pleasure of introducing my dear, dear friend, Anurima Bhargava. For those who've been coming to the summit for a few years, you know that I actually hired her as a baby child out of college. And it was before she went on to fame and fortune as a leading social, human rights and equal rights social justice warrior, where she's been very successful. And she is going to do the honors of our keynote interview. So Anurima, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you. Big cliche, I fell in the shower 5 weeks ago and fractured my pelvis. But I'm here. Hi, everyone. I can't even begin to tell you what an honor it is and a gift it has been to be able to learn so much about you, Jane, in the last few months. And I can tell you, in every corner of the world that I have been in, the people I have encountered have talked about what you've meant to them, what you've meant to their sense that they are not alone, what you meant to them in terms of the spark that you've provided for them to have strength, and for them to realize that they can do many different things in their lifetimes. And I myself have learned so much about myself through you. And you've been a topic of conversation with friends, with my family, with my therapist. And so I'm so grateful for just having the chance to learn from you. And I know that it'll be fun to do that today. So I'm gonna ask some questions, and I know Jane will talk about whatever you'd like to talk about in answer to those questions. But I want to start with a lot of your writings and reflections have centered upon the relationship you had to men in your life, from your father to your husbands, and as your daughter says, your chameleon-like relationship to them. And I wanted to ask you about when you first found yourself in a community of women, and how important that community was to centering and finding yourself.
Oh, okay. Simple little question. I grew up in the 50s and the 40s and 50s, and the thinking in those days was that to be a mature adult meant that you were a standalone individual and you could take care of yourself and you didn't need anybody and you were completely independent. And that's kind of what I thought growing up and becoming mature meant. And it took me, starting when I became an activist in the 70s, and meeting the women that I met that were part of the anti-Vietnam War movement, to realize that we're totally interconnected. And that I also realized that women understand that better than men. And as I met more and more women that were just so brave and so smart and strategic, I realized I'd been on the wrong track for a whole big chunk of my life. And I started realizing that what I needed were women friends. And it was hard for me to totally give myself over to that until I was a single woman and had left. I was married 3 times. And if you're married and your relationship isn't really completely authentic, it's hard to be a feminist, and it's hard to, I don't know, you can't really be a whole person. And it was so I finally ended up not needing a man to validate myself, and I started noticing that I needed women to be with me. And I was in my 60s by then. I'm a slow learner. I'm a slow late bloomer, which is okay as long as you make the flower show. And I did. But I was smart enough to have women friends that are smarter than me and more strategic than me, braver than me, and I'm smart enough to ask for help. You know, men don't do that. And I feel so bad for men. We do, and it's our strength. It's the huge strength that women have. We're not afraid to say, I don't know, I need you, I need help. Can you help me? And we hug each other and we ask for help. And we live longer than men, and I think that's why. You know? We have to raise our boys to be unafraid to ask for help and unafraid to express emotion and be emotional. And what really, you know, I lived 30 years in a kind of a meaningless, hedonistic life. And when I became an activist because of the Vietnam War, it changed everything about me and my life, and it was because of the women that I met. They were different than women and men that I'd ever met before. It was like the women, the activists, it was like looking through a keyhole at the future that we were fighting for. And I just wanted to be like them. And my friends, I want to be like them. One of them is right here. Alice Waters is right here. I almost fell out of my chair when I discovered she was here. She is an example. Eve Ensler, for example, who wrote the Vagina Monologues, is an example. Pat Mitchell is an example. I have strong, smart friends, and I'm around because of them. I probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my women friends. And, you know, there's something really great about being a late bloomer because, you know, if you're born with everything that you need, you know, if you kind of are always okay, well, then you don't know how good it feels to get okay, having not been. You know, the good things began in my life when I was already middle-aged, and it's great because I experienced what it means to have women friends when I hadn't had them before. Like, oh, it's like getting in a warm bath. You know? So, yeah, I remember when I became an embodied feminist. You know, for so long, I knew all the right people, Alice and Gloria Steinem, and I read the right books, and I made women-centered movies, but it was all here and theoretical until I was single, and then my friend Pat Mitchell, maybe some of you know her, she convinced me to go to New York. I was living in Atlanta at the time, to see Eve Ensler perform in the Vagina Monologues. All of the monologues she was doing all by herself. It was unusual. And so I said, okay, and I went. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen the Vagina Monologues. Well, her performing all of them was really something. And it was while I was laughing, because in the Vagina Monologues, there are things that are so touching that you're sobbing, and then you're laughing, and it was while I was laughing that I could feel the feminism move from my head into my body, I swear. And it's really what taught me the importance of art, because it takes you by surprise. You know, your guard is down, and then things start to rearrange themselves in you when art has broken you open that way. Yeah. Too much. I know we only have 25 minutes.
I'm sitting with all of what you just shared. And so you've been involved in so many movements to better all of us, from teenage pregnancy and sexual abuse to ending war, to racial justice, to more recently climate, among so many others. And I feel like these days we are drinking from a fire hose of troubles. And so I wanted to ask you, you know, how do you determine what to invest in terms of communities, issues, campaigns, which ones to invest in, and how do you figure out when it's time to move on to the next?
Well, they're all connected.
Agree.
That's one thing I learned in my old age, is there'd be no climate crisis if there was no racism. There'd be no climate crisis if there was no patriarchy, because it comes from a mindset that sees people in a hierarchy. You know, the white man is the one that knows at the top, and so on down the hierarchy. And transactional relationships with people and with nature. Well, I became an activist because of the Vietnam War, and that just seemed like the most important thing that had to change. And I was living in France at the time, and the French had already, they knew all about Vietnam because they had colonized Vietnam, and they were unable to defeat the Vietnamese. And so in France, they knew, what are you doing over there? You'll never win. You can kill them all, but you're not going to defeat them. And that's when I began to realize, oh my God, I've got to go back home and join with the people that are trying to stop it. And that took about 5 years to do. And then when the war ended, I was married to Tom Hayden, who was a movement leader, brilliant guy, who then we started focusing on the economy, on economic democracy, because we have a democracy, but we don't have an economic democracy. As we all know, I mean, inequality is a huge issue, and so we focused on that for a while. That's why I started the workout to fund. That organization was called the Campaign for Economic Democracy in California. And then it just then I married Ted Turner, and I was living in Georgia, which had the highest rates of poverty and adolescent pregnancy, and they go together. And so that, I learned very quickly that if you find girls younger than 15 who are pregnant or parenting, you can pretty much bet that they've been sexually assaulted, abused, raped when they were children, and my mother was. And so that was an issue that was very important to me, so I took that on, right? Because it was a big issue in the state that I was living in. And then whatever seems to be affecting people around me. It's funny. I remember when I was in my 40s, I think, and I was driving across the country, maybe still in my 30s, and this is before I saw E. Vensler's play, or I was not at all a feminist. And friends of mine from New York, a woman friend wrote me about, oh my God, there are 5,000 women outside my window in New York protesting something. I can't remember what it was, but I thought, what a waste of time. What a diversion. Women's issues, what? But then I realized what the issues were, and they were like my issues. And so then I began to work with women on, and then I began to notice that the world was changing. I'm a tomboy. I don't know, how many of you were tomboys? Yeah, see. When you have a room like this of women, you can be sure that they're probably climbed a lot of trees when they were young and wrestled with boys and stuff like that. And so I've always been outside a lot in nature, and I began to notice things were changing. And then I found out that we have a deadline. I mean, we have to cut our fossil fuel emissions in half in 8 years. And so, I mean, aren't you going to work on that? There's nothing more important in a way, because it affects everything. We can't have a democracy or healthy societies or anything if we don't do something about the climate. This is all going to be a joke. It's all going to go. And I started studying it, and I started reading what the scientists were saying, and it was just very clear. It's got to happen in 8 years, or the heat of the global warming is going to rise above 1.5 degrees Celsius. And that seems like, what is 1.5 degrees kind of pulled out of the air? No, that is the temperature that scientists are saying the world cannot get hotter than 1.5 degrees Celsius more than it was before we started burning fossil fuels during the Industrial Revolution. And if we don't do that, then ecosystems are going to begin to collapse. And these are ecosystems that we depend on for our lives, like the ocean. We get half our oxygen from the ocean. Forests, we get the other half from forests. Clean water, clean air, these things are disappearing. And I have he's 3.5 years old, grandson. And what I have found out in doing my research is that if we started right now doing what we need to do, like stopping any new fossil fuel development, then by the time he's 25, it's going to be okay. Well, that's a concrete thing to fight for. So I feel like this is the most important thing, and I'm a repeater. You know those what do you call them at the top of the hill? You know, when you see hills or mountains and you have the no, those towers that pick up the signal. They're called repeaters. They pick up the signal from down in the valley and bring it up over the mountain and so it can spread out wide. That's what celebrities do. We're repeaters. I'm totally not original. No, it's true. I'm not being coy. It's just you gotta know, and this is good about getting old, because by the time you're old, you know, what are your strengths? And my strength is not to invent ideas or things, but to find the good ideas and then send them over the hill. That's what I do.
I want to go back for a moment to your childhood, because one of the things I heard a lot about in the last couple of months is how grateful people are about the fact that you've talked about the griefs and the unnameable long wounds of your childhood. And what I want to ask you about is how, given all of that, have you determined who you trust? Who you
trust
put your
everybody.
faith, and who you put your faith into?
I kind of trust everybody. And who cares? So somebody turns out I don't know. I mean, I don't worry a lot. I'm not paranoid about anything. But I do believe that when women really tell the truth about their lives, that it's universal. When I was going to write 20-some years ago, when I was writing my memoir, and people said to me, well, why? I mean, you're white, you're privileged, what do you have to say that can help anybody? Nobody else is like that, hardly anybody else, so what do you have to communicate? Because you're so different. But I knew that wasn't true, that if I told the truth about the personal things, that it would reach other women, and boy, was I right. And then also some men. That really surprised me. Yeah. Especially gay men, because they know what it's like to grow up trying to be somebody you're not. How many grew up trying to be somebody you're not? Not so many. More of you are tomboys. That's good. That's good. I grew up trying to be somebody I wasn't, because I felt that nobody would love me unless I did that. And so I knew that if I talked about that it would touch other people. And I have a big mouth anyway, so why not just tell it all? Almost all. Because I let my children read the book, and then they told me what to take out.
One of the things that you talk a lot about is movements that you've been a part of, and I wanted this part of you that has soldiered on. That's what you saw as a strength when you were in your childhood. Like, you've got to just keep going, right? And how do you think about that now in terms of movements? And how do we think of not soldiering on in isolation as part of the ways in which we can engage in movements?
Well, we shouldn't do anything in isolation. We should get out of that kind of a mode. I'm old enough to remember a time when this nation was not so individualistic. When many more people belonged to groups and clubs and book clubs and garden clubs and church groups and all kinds of things. And belonging to clubs and organizations has dropped way, way down. And it started in the 80s with Ronald Reagan here and Margaret Thatcher over in England, raising individualism up on a pedestal and making anything collective, common good, the common well-being. That all became like, ugh, what are you talking about? And government became the problem. And it's really had a bad effect on us, and we have to change that. We have to do everything we can to create community, work together. Individually, we're so vulnerable, and we can't really accomplish that much, but in a group, if you have strategy and organization, we can do just about anything, and that's what we have to work on, is the collective. What was the question?
It doesn't matter, because you just answered it.
Really? Yeah. I did? Oh, good. I mean, I met some of you upstairs before the luncheon to have pictures taken, and I mean, the person that runs public schools in Chicago, the person that runs public schools, I mean, you are quite a group of women. I am so proud and honored to be here, really. And education is so important, and I also want to fight for public schools. We have to keep our public schools and make them better and better and better the way it was originally intended. My kids went to public schools because my husband and I felt that it was really important that they not grow up the way I did in a complete bubble, and not knowing people who were very different and really not knowing what was going on. I went to these fancy private schools, but my kids went to public schools, and I'm all for it. And so bravo to all of you for fighting for education.
You've been doing a lot of podcasts lately, and I've been listening to all of them. And one question that I just pulled from it, and I wanted everyone here to hear your answer is you were on the first episode of Wiser, Julia Louis-Dreyfus's podcast. I also will commend your conversation with Glennon Doyle too. But I wanted, there was a question you answered that she asked about what advice you'd give yourself at the age of 21.
Had to do it over again, you mean? God forbid. I would. I mean, they were not the good old days, I can tell you. I am way happier now than when I was 20. When I was 20, I would have needed to be told, don't give up, it gets better. And stay curious, keep asking questions, and no is a complete sentence. That's AA. Yeah. I needed to be told that. Also, I needed to be told it's really hard to be young, especially a girl in adolescence. It's very hard. So don't worry. You'll get through it, okay?
So there's a documentary about your life in 5 acts. You talk about your life being in 3 acts. And the first act being your first 30 years, your second 30 years, and now we're in your 3rd act. Where are we in your 3rd act, and have we reached the climax yet?
Climax, that's an interesting choice.
It is.
Not for 10 years. If you get my meaning. And guess what? I don't miss it at all. I've even lost my dog. But I'll tell you, I know this is kind of off track, but when in Grace and Frankie, one of the things that I loved is that Grace and Frankie invented a vibrator for older women, who had wrist issues
And Jane, which is your favorite?
Huh?
Which is your favorite?
I'm not going to say.
You've said this publicly, so I'm not. I mean, this is out there in the world.
The rabbit.
Yes.
But when those episodes of Grace and Frankie came on, it's like anybody that I knew even a little would send me vibrators. I have a drawer so full of different vibrators you wouldn't believe it. So no, I don't miss it. What was the question?
This is actually where it would be fun. It was going to be fun to go, and you've taken us there. So.
Oh, you really want to go? No, anyway,
I was asking where you were in your third act.
in my third act. I
And,
don't know.
and it sounds like the climax might have been 10 years ago.
I don't know where I am. I don't know where I guess I'm halfway through I'm almost at the end is where I am, actually. And that's all fine. No, I'm a big believer in thinking a lot about death. Because if you really think about it, life doesn't make sense without death. The way silence makes no sense without noise, and dark makes no sense without light. And other cultures think about death a lot. Mexico, for example, there's always skeletons at every festival and holiday. You see skeletons. It's like they're saying, "Come on, death, I'm here. You want me? I'm ready." Or "I'll see you later," or whatever. But they don't try to hide from it the way we do in this. So I think a lot about death, and I figured out when I started my third act when I was 60. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to be it. This is the last act. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to live this? And so I thought about the end, and I remembered my dad took a long time to die. And I would sit by him, and I knew that he was going to die with a lot of regrets. And so I realized, and that's when I realized that I'm not afraid of dying, but I'm afraid of dying with a lot of regrets when it's too late to do anything about it. Oh God, if only I had told her that I loved her more. Oh, if only I didn't want any if-onlys. And so that's really good to be thinking about at the beginning of your third act, because it means that you will live your last act in such a way that when you get to the end, you'll have as few regrets as possible. And I'm doing it right now. My daughter is very quick to say I was not a good mother, but I'm working on it. I'm almost 86 and I'm working on it. It's never too late. Because, we want to die. We never know how we're going to die. But we have to imagine, just pick a thing. I want to die in my own bed, and I want to be surrounded by people who love me. That means I have to earn that love while I'm still alive, And you got to get some wisdom so that you can also say wise things to them. I liked all that wisdom that was being announced here before we came on here. Like what bridge to burn, what bridge to cross, and all that's good. So I'm working now on having a good death. That's where I am in my third act. And it's like really fun and really important, I think.
So I also want to do a speed round, inspired by Jane. I'm the other Jane who was here earlier, and Jane Swift. And I want to ask a couple of questions, and just as quickly as whatever comes to your mind first.
Oh. Okay.
Favorite leading man?
Lily Tomlin. Way ahead of everybody else.
I suppose she'd also be your favorite leading woman, but I'll ask that too.
Well, yeah. She's gay. She's both. She's my favorite leading man, my favorite leading woman.
Okay.
And we finished Grace and Frankie, and 10 days later we started a movie called Moving On, which is really good. Y'all should see that. That's fun. And then right after that we did Eddie for Brady. And I miss her. That was like a year ago, and I haven't been able to work with her since then. But I will.
Yes, you will.
Yeah.
I think you're always working with her. I feel like that's part of what the gift you've given us through Grace and Frankie and so much else.
I'll tell you something else. Yeah. Being an activist is a lot easier when you have a hit series behind you.
Sure. You mentioned a bunch earlier. So a women activist you admire.
Nalele Kobo. She's 20. She lives in Wilmington. She got cancer because there was an oil well right next to her house. And she fought it, and she was put in witness protection at age 9. That's how brave she was. And she just recently won the Goldman Environmental Award, which is the largest award that they give to environmentalists. And she's brave as hell. And she's just this young thing. Yeah. But there's lots of others. There's Alice Waters. There's Bill McKibben. There's Annie Leonard. There's my world is peopled with wonderful activists and brave women.
There's a lot in this room, too. Your favorite movement song?
Standing by the waters. Listen, if any of you are musical, the climate movement needs a song. I had an interview, did a podcast with James Carville recently, and the first thing he said to me, "Your movement needs a song," and he's right. The civil rights movement had a song. We need a song, and it's got to be kind of like Standing by the. We shall not be moved. Kind of one of those where you can sing it while you're walking, and it's got a rhythm, and it's sort of inspirational. Yes. So I'm just putting that out there.
Great. We heard
just
you.
in case.
We've kind of already gone here, but I'm one exception to the. This was also on Julia's podcast about how you're not getting naked these days because of nips and wounds and holes. But I want to know what the one exception to the no longer getting naked rule would be. Who would it be?
Put makeup on to see my grandson. What do you want? I don't want him to think of me as an old hag, which I look like in the morning. So I do. I care about how I look when I see my grandson. I'm not even going to get naked with him. Even if he was a girl, I wouldn't. No, I don't want to inflict this on anyone.
I mean, it's pretty extraordinary for any of us to be in the room with such fabulousness. So I mean, half the reason I think most of us have tried to look the way that we do is because of you and the way in which you made sure that we were inspired to be strong and to be healthy and to work on fitness. So I just want to thank you for that, too.
I mean, it makes me, I get upset with myself, though, because it shouldn't matter. I wish I was like Vanessa Redgrave. Her face is lived in, and it's so beautiful, and she's got all her life there. I'm a coward, and I know that, I don't think it should matter how you look naked, but when you grow up in the 50s, and you feel like, no one will ever love you if you don't look right, and it's hard to get over that. That's what I should have said to myself when I was 20. Fuck it all.
I should end there, but 3 more. Lily Tomlin in 1 word.
Mensch.
Jane Fonda in 1 word.
Brave.
And
luckier than she is smart, and that's the truth. Or as Lily would say, that's the truth.
and then, as you're looking around this beautiful room of women, what is the campaign that we should all join you on today?
Well, listen, you all are, up to your necks in one of the most important fights that there is, which is the education of this country. And I thank you for that. So I don't want to distract you from that. However, I think that, I do think that the climate is an existential crisis, and that it's going to be really hard to do anything if we don't do something about the climate. So just, number one, when you vote with the climate in your heart. And one way to do that is to find out, and you can do it, find out if the candidate takes money from the fossil fuel industry. Because if the candidate does, the candidate is not going to vote for the future. We have to elect people who will vote for people, will work for people and not for corporations. So that's one thing. Vote with the climate in your heart, too. I mean, it's important personally that we try to minimize our carbon footprint because it makes us feel good and it makes us not be hypocrites, and it's important, but understand that the issue that we're confronting is humongous. Our economy is based on fossil fuels. So we're talking about this is not an easy change. This is changing the bedrock of this country. I personally think that while and when we do this, we will also be changing our relationships with each other. I think that this country will become more equal. I think it will become healthier. I think our economy will be more stable. It certainly will be more democratic. And so any way that you can participate in getting the people that we elect to office to do what they should do, including Biden, it's inexplicable to me why he's doing what he's doing, given what he promised, and I worry that young people are going to get turned off. But he is also doing good things, and we have to support that and try to force him to do more. So just whenever you can join in, please do. Should I add anything else, Alice?
How about a garden on the White House lawn?
This is Alice. A garden on the White House lawn. Garden, that's why you're here. That's why you're here, of course, because it's a school. And Alice is getting food from gardens nearby into schools for luncheons to feed the kids healthy, nutritious food. This is what she lives for, and she and I are going to go to Detroit. Anybody from Detroit here? Oh, we're coming. we're going to have school lunches. We're going to have all the empty lots in Detroit turned into farms, and then we're going to provide those healthy lunches to kids in schools in Detroit and then take it from there. I mean, it's already happening all over California, but we're going to do this, so maybe we'll see you all there. Yeah.
Thank you, Jane.
And thank you for what you do.
Yeah.
You who head up this whole thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
She could look at her. She should be president.
No, she's absolutely extraordinary.
She looks like a president.
Yes. Well, thank you, Jane. Thank you for your life.
Thank you all very much.
And everything you've given to ours.
Thank you.